order. This morning, the Finance Committee examines the Change Healthcare hack that nearly brought our country's healthcare system to a standstill 6 weeks ago. Joining the committee is Mr. Andrew Witty, the CEO of United Health Group. You'll hear them called UHG, and they own Change Healthcare. Let me put things in perspective. Last year, United Health Group generated $324 billion in revenue, making it the fifth largest company in the country. Overall, the company touches 152 million individuals across all lines of business: insurance, physician practice, home health, and pharmacy. With its profits, UHG has purchased dozens of other healthcare companies and is the largest purchaser of physician practices. This corporation is a healthcare leviathan. I believe the bigger the company, the bigger the responsibility to protect its systems from hackers. UHG was a big target long before it was hacked. The FBI says that the healthcare industry is the #1 target of ransomware. It is obvious why. Change Healthcare processes roughly 15 billion healthcare transactions annually, and a third of Americans' patients' records pass through its digital doors. Change specializes in moving patient data from doctor's office to doctor's office, or to and from your insurance company. That means medical bills that are chock full of sensitive diagnoses, treatments, and medical histories that reveal everything from abortion to mental health disorders to diagnosis of cancer to sexually transmitted infections. Military personnel are included in this data, leaving this sensitive patient information vulnerable to hackers, whether criminals or a foreign government, is, in my view, as a member of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, a clear national security threat. I don't think it's a stretch that the impact here rivals the 2015 hack of government personnel data from the Office of Personnel Management. The FBI called that a treasure trove of counterintelligence information for foreign intelligence sources. United Health Group has not revealed how many patients' private medical records were stolen, how many providers went without reimbursement, and how many seniors were unable to pick up their prescriptions as a result of the hack. The failures of CEOs like Mr. Witty, who months in can't figure out how many people have had their data stolen, validates the FBI warning. In the wake of this hack, United essentially disconnected Change from the rest of the healthcare system. It took weeks for Change to get back online, leaving healthcare providers all across the country, certainly in my home state of Oregon, in a state of financial bedlam. Doctors and hospitals went weeks delivering services but without getting paid. Insurance companies couldn't reimburse providers. Even today, key functions supporting plans and providers, including sending receipts for services that have been paid and the ability to reimburse patients for their out-of-pocket costs, are not back up and running. The small providers, particularly mental health providers, have been left holding the bag, stuffing envelopes with paper claims, and unable to get straight answers on how long this outage is going to last. And patients are bearing the brunt of it. Prescriptions went unfilled, patients were stuck at the hospital longer than needed, and Americans are still in the dark about how much of their sensitive information was stolen. The credit monitoring service Change is now offering is cold comfort to all of these frustrated patients across the land. The Change Healthcare hack is considered by many to be the biggest cybersecurity disruption to healthcare in American history. It is, in my view, Exhibit A that the country needs tough cybersecurity standards, and they're needed to protect critical infrastructure and patients across the country. The Health and Human Services Department doesn't require healthcare providers, payers, or healthcare clearinghouses like Change to meet minimum cybersecurity standards, unlike industries regulated by other federal agencies. Meeting a baseline of essential cybersecurity standards is a must. but it is meaningless without strong enforcement. Health and Human Services has not conducted a proactive cybersecurity audit in 7 years. As it stands, if a company doesn't comply with the relatively meager cybersecurity regulations, the fines amount to nothing more than a slap on the wrist. In my view, federal agencies need to fast-track new cybersecurity rules for Americans' private medical records, and the Congress needs to watchdog this every day to make sure that what is getting done is the essentials of protecting patient data. Finally, the Change hack is a dire warning about the consequences of too big to fail megacorporations gobbling up larger and larger shares of the healthcare system. It is long past time to do a comprehensive scrub of United Health anti-competitive practices, which likely prolonged the fallout from the hack. For example, Change Healthcare's exclusive contracts prevented more than 1/3 of providers from switching clearinghouses, even though Change's systems were down for weeks. Accountability for Change Healthcare's failure starts at the top. Before this hearing, I asked the company which members of its board have cybersecurity expertise. UHG pointed to the NCAA president, Charlie Baker, who signed some technology-related legislation years ago when he was governor of Massachusetts. He certainly seems to be an expert on basketball, but UHG needs an actual cybersecurity expert on its board. Mr. Witty owes Americans an explanation for how a company of UHG's size and importance failed to have multi-factor authentication on a server providing open-door access to protected health information, why its recovery plans were so woefully inadequate, and how long it's going to take to finally secure all of its systems. I hope that today's hearing can mark the beginning of a bipartisan effort here in the Finance Committee. That's what we've done on PBMs and a variety of other important issues. I encourage all the members of the committee on both sides of the aisle to focus on the subject in hand. That is because this is so important, it's so vital, and there's much to discuss. Senator Crapo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate you holding this hearing today. And thank you, Mr. Witty, for being here with us. On February 21, 2024, United Health Group learned that its subsidiary, Change Healthcare, was the victim of a cyber attack launched by a suspected nation-state associated cybersecurity threat actor. In response, Change, the nation's largest healthcare clearinghouse, which processes $1.5 trillion in medical claims annually, disconnected all of its systems to prevent the hackers from obtaining additional data. The fallout from this unprecedented attack has affected the entire healthcare sector. By crippling Change's functionality, the hackers left providers unable to verify patients' insurance coverage, submit claims and receive payments, exchange clinical records, generate cost estimates and bills, or process prior authorization requests. In the immediate aftermath of the attack, many providers had to rely on reserves to cover the resulting revenue losses. An American Hospital Association survey found that more than 90% of hospitals were financially impacted by the cyber attack, with more than 70% reporting that the outage had directly affected their ability to care for patients. More than 2 weeks after the cyber attack was announced, the Department of Health and Human Services released a public statement and guidance related to the incident. On March 9th, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services made accelerated and advanced payments available to impacted Medicare providers. The administration's delay exacerbated an already uncertain landscape, leaving providers and patients with reasonable concerns about access to essential medical services and life-saving drugs. While the February hack on Change was by far the most disruptive cyber attack on the healthcare industry to date, it was certainly not the first. According to a report by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the healthcare sector experienced more ransomware attacks than any other critical infrastructure sector in 2023. In addition to the processing and revenue issues experienced by providers, patients, private identification and healthcare information was obtained by malicious actors during the breach. Unfortunately, personal healthcare data has become increasingly attractive to cyber criminals who seek to use that information for blackmail or identity theft. For patients, the emotional and financial effects of leaked private information can have a devastating impact for years. Although many of Change's functions have now resumed, trust in the security of its platforms needs to be rebuilt. We owe it to American patients and to our frontline healthcare providers, from health systems to clinicians and community pharmacies, to ensure that this does not and cannot happen again. Today's hearing offers a valuable opportunity to learn from United's experience so we can better protect against and quickly react to future cyber attacks. Gaining a deeper understanding of how the hackers infiltrated Change will help identify and address gaps in our existing cybersecurity infrastructure. Evaluating steps taken by United in response to the attack, from disconnecting its platforms to notifying law enforcement, will offer lessons on how to build a more resilient and collaborative healthcare system moving forward. We must also assess the response of the federal government, which plays a critical role in those efforts. HHS has a responsibility to serve as a central hub for coordination, convening insights from other branches of government and the private sector to deploy timely information about active threats, as well as best practices to deter intrusions and resources should an attack occur. Thank you, Mr. Witty, again for being here to discuss building a more secure, resilient, and responsive healthcare system. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Crapo. Andrew Witty is the Chief Executive Officer of the United Health Group. Prior to that, he was the Executive Vice President of United Health and CEO of Optum. From 2008 to 2017, Mr. Witty was CEO and a Director of GlaxoSmithKline. Mr. Witty, we appreciate your being here. I believe you're going to take 5 minutes or so to share your testimony, and we've got a lot of member interest, and you're going to get questions, and I'm going to do everything I can to keep them on this extraordinarily important topic. Mr. Witty.
Thank you, and good morning, Chairman Wyden, Ranking Member Crapo, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify here today. My name is Andrew Witty. I serve as Chief Executive Officer of United Health Group. Our mission is to help people live healthier lives and help make the health system work better for everyone. We pursue this mission through our two distinct businesses, United Healthcare, which provides a full range of benefits, and Optum, which brings together care delivery, pharmacy services, and technology and data to advance patient-centered care. Change Healthcare is now part of Optum. It enables information, claims, and payments to flow quickly and accurately between physicians, pharmacists, health plans, and governments. I appreciate the committee's interest in the recent cyber attack on Change Healthcare. As a result of this malicious cyber attack, patients and providers have experienced disruptions, and people are worried about their private health data. To all those impacted, let me be very clear. I'm deeply, deeply sorry. Our response to this attack has been grounded in three principles: to secure the systems, to ensure patient access to care and medication, and to assist providers with their financial needs. We have deployed the full resources of United Health Group in this effort. I want to assure the American public we will not rest, I will not rest, until we fix this. Cyber experts continue to investigate the incident, and while we will learn more and our understanding may change, here's what I can share today. Cyber criminals entered a Change Healthcare portal, exfiltrated data, and on February the 21st deployed ransomware. The portal they accessed was not protected by multi-factor authentication. Our response was swift and forceful. To contain infection, we immediately severed connectivity and secured the perimeter of the attack to prevent malware from spreading. It worked. There is no evidence of spread beyond Change Healthcare. Within hours of the ransomware launch, we contacted the FBI. We continue to share information with them so that these criminals can be brought to justice. As we've responded to this attack, including dealing with the demand for ransom, my overarching priority has been to do everything possible to protect people's personal health information. The decision to pay a ransom was mine. This was one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. As you know, we found files in the exfiltrated data containing protected health information and personally identifiable information, which could cover a substantial proportion of people in America. So far, we have not seen evidence that materials such as doctors' charts or full medical histories were exfiltrated. It will take several months before enough information will be available to identify and notify impacted customers and individuals, partly because the files containing that data were compromised in the attack. Rather than waiting to complete this review, we're providing free credit monitoring and identity theft protections for 2 years, along with a dedicated call centre staffed by clinicians to provide support services. Anyone concerned that their data may have been impacted should visit changecybersupport.com for more information. Meanwhile, we continue to make substantial progress in restoring Change Healthcare services. First, the team built a new technology environment in just a matter of weeks. Second, we prioritised our restoration effort on services most vital to ensuring access to care: pharmacy services, claims, and payments to providers. And third, while these efforts were underway, we worked quickly to provide financial assistance to providers who need it. We have advanced more than $6.5 billion in accelerated payments and no interest, no fee loans to thousands of providers. Most of these funds are for claims for non-UHC health plans, and about 34% of the loans have gone to safety net hospitals and federally qualified health centres. We will provide this assistance for as long as it takes to get providers' claims and payments flowing at pre-incident levels. And if there are providers in your states who need help, please put us in touch with them. Fighting cybercrime is an enormous task, and one that requires us all, industry, law enforcement, and policymakers, to come together. I look forward to answering your questions today.
Thank you, Mr. Witty. Let me begin with this. This hack could have been stopped with Cybersecurity 101. And I'm talking specifically about multi-factor authentication, MFA. When your bank app asks you to enter a code sent by text or email, that's MFA. It secures your account even if your password is learned. Yet your testimony reveals this first server that was hacked didn't have multi-factor authentication. So question one, I'd like a yes or no answer to, Mr. Witty. Prior to the hack, did you or any of your senior management know that UHG was not requiring MFA company-wide? Yes or no?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the question. Our policy is to have MFA for externally facing systems.
So if the answer is yes, then that makes my point that on your watch, there was a cybersecurity failure. And then that's what caused the harm to patients, the healthcare sector, and your investors. I don't believe there are any excuses for that. So my second question is, will you commit within 6 months at the latest to require multi-factor authentication company-wide and meet the tough MFA standards that are required of federal agencies? Again, a yes or no answer.
Mr. Chairman, yes, I'm happy to commit to that. In fact, I can confirm to you that as of today, across the whole of UHG, all of our external facing systems have got multi-factor authentication enabled.
We will take that as a yes. It shouldn't have taken the worst cyber attack ever in the healthcare sector for an agreement to do this bare minimum. Now, second, with respect to national security, people claiming to be involved with this hack have asserted publicly that they stole data on U.S. government employees, including active duty U.S. military service members. My colleagues remember the 2015 hack of OPM government personnel data, which obviously posed very serious counterintelligence concerns. And I am very concerned, as I said in my opening statement, about the national security implications of this hack as well. Are you in a position this morning to say whether the hackers stole data pertaining to U.S. government employees?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the question. Like you, I'm extremely concerned about any patient's information, but particularly in the context you just described. So far, through the process of working through the data, what we've been able to identify is indeed a substantial proportion of people across the country's data could be implicated here. We do believe there will be members of the armed forces and the veterans associated.
When can you give us in writing the number of military personnel affected and your best assessment of who they are? Can I have that quickly?
I give you my absolute commitment. That is
a week?
Top priority. It will take longer than a week, but as fast as we possibly can, we will get that.
This is a national security priority, Mr. Witty. 2 weeks, I expect it.
We will absolutely prioritize that, sir.
All right. Let's talk about why things are taking so long, and particularly how hard providers are being hit, because they're paying the price for the failures that have been made on your watch. How much longer will a provider who sent in a claim for services delivered in February have to wait in order to be paid?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the question. Our belief at this point is that claims flow across the entire country is essentially back to normal. Certainly from a United Health Group's perspective, we are paying claims as soon as they arrive. We're aware that other companies may not be paying as quickly.
Providers are telling me it's going to take until at least June to clear the backlog. Can you do that earlier?
We can move absolutely faster than that. And in the meantime, we are providing financial support.
When can you expect to have that cleared?
We believe the system is broadly back to normal. Now, if there are any providers in state who you'd like to refer us to, we can make sure that they are particularly
Practically
addressed.
every provider I bump into is waiting to be paid.
Those payments from United certainly have been made. We are caught up, and we continue to advance significant interest-free loans for others.
Will you commit to waiving deadlines for timely filings and appeals for claims until everything's back in order?
Yes, sir, we have already waived those.
Will you commit to paying meaningful compensation to each provider and plan whose business operations you disrupted?
So we're happy to engage with providers to discuss that.
Please send that to me in writing, how the compensation system would work. Let me mention one other area very quickly. I've been following your various comments, and consistently, your views seem to minimize the impact of your involvement. You say that United Healthcare payments processing accounts for only 6% of payments in the healthcare system. My view is that's basically hiding the ball. In 2022, the Department of Justice said the change retains records of at least 211 million individuals going back to 2012. So how many people have actually been impacted? Where did you find those files? And what medical information was stolen? I need answers to those three questions. How many have been impacted? Where did you find the files? What medical information is stolen?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the question. As I've said, that is very much a top priority for us to get to the bottom of. We're working our way through that. As of this point, we have not identified anything like medical records or medical histories. What we have seen is claims information.
But you don't have the logs that would show what data walked out the door, because we have been working to get that and we haven't seen it. Senator Crapo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Witty, the FBI has repeatedly warned that the healthcare sector is particularly attractive to cyber criminals. As your testimony notes, United alone experiences an attempted cyber intrusion once every 70 seconds. However, nationwide, cybersecurity preparedness and response guidelines for healthcare sectors appear to be disjointed. Without disclosing proprietary or security-related details, how do you intend to revise United's cybersecurity protocols to incorporate the lessons that you've learned from this experience?
Senator Crapo, thank you very much for the question. First and foremost, let me reiterate how seriously we take this and how diligently we are working to make this right, both technically and also to make sure we understand the patient information implications. To your question of how we're responding to this, first and foremost, let me reiterate, we have an enforced policy across the organization to have multi-factor authentication on all of our external systems, which is in place.
Well, can I interrupt for just a second? I think part of my question is, and you were about to get to that, but I want to be sure that you're responsive to this. Is it as simple as fixing the multi-factor system?
It's multi-layered, sir. So that is one element, but it is only one element of the defense. Making sure, so for example, we now have implemented, in addition to our normal corporate-wide scanning of our technology environment, we've now brought external third parties to do double or treble scanning across our systems as a further protection layer. We've also made the decision to strengthen our oversight of cybersecurity at the company by bringing to our board on a every meeting basis Mandiant, which is the leading cybersecurity advisory service in America. They have been extremely helpful in understanding this attack, and they have become a board advisor to ensure that we have the very best advice at the top of the company.
Would you agree that this type, and maybe even a stronger approach than this type, needs to become standard across our healthcare industry, everything from government to the private sector, and frankly, the entire aspect of our healthcare system?
Senator Greber, I would agree with that. And what we saw in Change Healthcare, which was a company which just came into our group a little over a year and a half ago, was a company which was an older company, had older legacy technologies, but I think is very typical of many small to medium-sized organizations in our healthcare environment. And therefore, inevitably, there is going to be a lot of work to be done to upgrade those standards, but I do agree with your assertion.
Well, thank you. And I'd like to move on to restoration and protection of patient information. Your testimony indicates both pharmacy services and medical claims are now flowing at near normal levels. Is that accurate?
That's our belief, yes.
And while this is welcome news, the effects of the cyber attack continue, from ongoing revenue backlogs to unfolding details about exposed patient health and identity information. Which functions remain offline, and when do you expect 100% of Change's systems to be restored?
Thank you very much for the question. So all of our core systems are now up and fully functional. So that means pharmacy processing, claims, payments. The systems which are not available are really ancillary support functions, so not determinative of the main claims activity or the payments, which is where the disruption has been caused. I'd also just like to emphasize that as soon as the attack took place, we encouraged providers to divert their volumes to other competitors to Change, of which there are several. And many of them continue to operate through those channels, which is another way in which normal service was resumed.
Have you heard reservations from providers about reconnecting to Change? And if so, how are you working to address those concerns?
Mr. Chairman, yes, I think that's a natural and good concern for people to have after an attack like this. You want to be reassured that the system is safe to reconnect to. That's why we disconnected so quickly in the beginning, so that we didn't infect anybody else. And the reason why it's taken longer than you might expect to recover is we've literally built this platform back from scratch so that we can reassure people that there are not elements of the old attacked environment within the new technology, the new technical environment that we've created. And we're sharing all of those details with clients and customers as they reconnect, and I'm pleased to say they are reconnecting substantially.
All right, thank you. And finally, would you share an update on your understanding of the magnitude and the type of patient information that may have been obtained by the hackers? And when do you expect to begin the process of contacting impacted individuals?
Thank you for your question. We're working closely with the regulators on that last point of timing, how to and when to start communicating. We want to try and avoid piecemeal communication, and it's our top priority to get this done just as fast as possible.
Thank you.
Thank my colleague. Just on this multi-factor authentication, we know that we heard from your people that you had a policy, but you all weren't carrying it out, and that's why we had the problem. Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being with us. I'm from Tennessee. We have been absolutely inundated with phone calls since this came back. People are trying to get some clarity around your statement about a substantial portion of people in America being affected by this, because right now it looks like anybody that is doing business with you. And I will tell you this, the reality that hospitals and providers are facing is wildly different from the rosy picture that you have painted. You have made a statement recently that payment processing by Change Healthcare is at approximately 86% of pre-incident levels. This morning, you said that it was back to normal. And I will tell you this, there is a backlog that many of our providers and hospitals have from 9 weeks of not being able to get in and make these claims. We have, and here's a good for instance for you, a small independent private act hospital in West Tennessee. And they have diligently submitted all of their claims, and they are burdened with a backlog of Medicare claims that is equivalent to 30 days of revenue. And they're waiting for these things to be transmitted to Medicare. And this is all because of the missteps that you all have had. Now, every day they call to get an update. Every single day they're calling. And they get the runaround every single day, repeatedly. It is like you all can't figure this out. And the absence of Medicare electronic remittance is compounding the problem, and it's requiring that manual payment processing. And of course, this goes into labor cost. You've got error rates. So when can Tennessee providers and hospitals expect you all to clear the backlog, to catch up, and be back to normal?
Senator, thank you very much for the question, and I'm very sorry to hear the experience in your state of those hospitals. We will reach out to your office to find out the names of those hospitals. We will get connected with them.
Take every hospital, every provider.
So
we have hospitals that are pulling on a line of credit. Are you going to pay that interest? Are you going to reimburse that?
We are offering interest-free loans directly ourselves and be more than willing.
No, I said, are you going to pay these interest costs? Okay, let me move on with you, because one of the surprises, and the chairman just mentioned this, is the lack of redundancies that you all had built into the system. Now, your revenues are bigger than some countries' GDP. And how in heaven's name did you not have the necessary redundancies so that you did not experience this attack and find yourself so vulnerable?
Thank you for the question. First and foremost, Change Healthcare had only recently become part of United Health Group. We were in the process of upgrading and modernizing their technology. The attack itself had the effect of locking up the various backup systems which had been developed inside Change before it was acquired. That's really the root cause of why it's taken so long to bring it back. And as I emphasize that we have worked to rebuild a brand new technical environment so that we know that it is modern and it's not infected from the attack.
Well, there may be excuses, but was there not a thought process put in place on the front end as you were going through this of how you would protect yourself from vulnerabilities?
Change Healthcare came into the organization just about a year and a half ago.
I'm fully aware of that.
We were in the process of upgrading their technology when this attack.
All right, there again, for whatever reason, short-sightedness and not having a plan to incorporate is let's move on. Optum, because it's widely acknowledged that Optum's temporary assistance program fails to adequately address the financial setbacks that are caused by this. Now, we've got one Tennessee provider that disclosed receiving a one-time payment of $8,000, significantly below their usual daily revenue of $20,000. And these providers have resorted to tapping into personal savings, retirement funds, seeking loans from banks. And so are you going to cover all of those costs that they have had to incur in order to keep the doors open because you did not have an appropriate backup plan?
As important as this question is, briefly, because we got a lot of members interested, answer.
So, Senator, thank you for the question. Very happy to engage with those providers. We'll reach out to
We
your
look
office
forward to the
together.
engagement.
Thank you, Senator Blackburn. Senator Mendez.
Mr. Witty, your company's slow progress in restoring services and advancing loans to providers caused operational disruptions with consequences for providers, pharmacies, and patients across the nation. For weeks, hospitals and providers had to deal with low loan offers and onerous terms from the company, in some cases less than 1% of their typical weekly billing, all while patients suffered. Your company is the nation's largest private health insurer and the largest physician employer in the country, earning billions in profits every quarter. It's unacceptable that it took so long to help providers during a crisis of your creating. Now I'm concerned about what's going to happen on the back end. So do you commit to not exploiting the destabilized provider markets that you created to further acquire other subsidiaries? That simple yes or no would be great.
Senator, absolutely, we will not take advantage of that, and we have not. I'd also like to reassure you, we understand that in the effort to go quickly in terms of setting up our loan program, we didn't get all of the terms and conditions right. We fixed that very early, and we've now been able to advance $6.5 billion.
So let's talk about that. United Healthcare, as you have just said, claims to have distributed $6.5 billion in financial support to providers. But you're dealing with an enormous backlog of claims estimated to be easily over $14 billion, with some estimates putting the total impacted services at many multiples of that. In other words, your accelerated or advanced payments were a tiny fraction of the total amount of services affected. It's my understanding that United Healthcare and its subsidiaries know to the penny what the average provider bills in an average day, week, or month is. Yet providers in my state and across the country were struggling to keep their doors open as they waited for these payments. What reasonable explanation could you have for taking so long to get these accelerated payments out the door?
Senator, thank you again for the question. Unfortunately, United does not know the flows to folks from other payers than United, which is part of the reason why our initial approach was not as effective as we'd have liked to have been. We put in place a mechanism which, for the vast majority of providers, gives them authorization on interest-free loans within hours of application, and that remains open and available for providers who need it today.
It seems to me almost incredible to believe that you do not know a company that is so long established and you don't know the flow of what a daily, weekly, monthly amount is to a certain provider. That's hard to believe.
So we understand the flow when we are the payer, but oftentimes we're not the payer, and those would be the situations. And as I'm sure you are aware, we have been making loans to underwrite the cash flow consequences for other payers, not just United Healthcare.
Well, it seems to me that you wasted a lot of time trying to pull a fast one by imposing onerous loan terms on providers. Can you commit to not demanding loan repayments until the claims backlog is cleared?
So we've streamlined all of our terms and conditions, and yes, we've already told providers that there is no need to repay these interest-free loans until 45 days after they have concluded they are back to normal.
Do any of the loan terms prohibit health providers from working with any of United or Optum's competitors?
No.
Now, following the breach, you offered to do breach notifications for covered entities like hospitals and provider groups that are still grappling with severe and ongoing disruptions to daily operations. Now, this commitment is an important step in the right direction, as providers should not be bound by the burden of providing HIPAA-required breach notifications. But no prudent medical group can rely on vague promises containing no specifics with respect to timing or implementation. Providers currently face mounting concerns about their own regulatory exposure should United not fulfill these promises. Further, as more patients become aware of the possible disclosures of their sensitive information, they will turn to their providers for information and assurances, neither of which can currently be provided. So when can providers expect concrete details on breach notifications in writing from United Health Group?
Sir, this is our top priority. We want to get this done as fast as possible, and we're working with the regulators to ensure that we can get that communication as quickly as possible.
Okay, so can you give us a time frame? Is that a week? Is it a month?
I think it will be in the next several weeks.
And what sort of documentation will United Health Group require of covered entities, and will agreements include information about limitation or waiver of liability?
That's something we're working through with the regulators so that we can be very clear to those providers.
I'd like you to respond to the committee when you get to that conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Mendez. Senator Grassley's next.
Welcome to the committee. Last month, I wrote to Health and Human Services Secretary Becerra regarding protecting critical infrastructure within the healthcare sector. In that letter, I highlighted the need for a strong relationship between public and private partners to ensure the safety of U.S. critical infrastructure systems. I also inquired about legacy information technology systems. Cyber attacks on our healthcare system not only have severe impact on our economy, but put lives at risk. So my first question is, what's United Health Group's relationship with HHS and other government agencies as it relates to cybersecurity of the healthcare industry? How have HHS and Cybersecurity and Information Security Agency worked with your company in the aftermath of the cybersecurity failure?
Senator Grassley, thank you for the question. We've had a close engagement, I would say daily engagement, with particularly CMS within HHS. CMS have been extremely engaged and supportive through this, particularly in terms of how we've worked to support providers and to prioritize recovery of the system. And the FBI has been our prime partner in terms of law enforcement and response to the attack itself.
Does United Health Group use legacy IT systems that need to be updated? If so, what's been done to update?
So Change Healthcare is a good example of a company that came into our organization with older technologies, a 40-year-old company with many different technology generations within it. As we always do with new companies like that, we strive to upgrade them to the standards of United Health Group, which I believe are consistently higher than the companies that we brought into the organization.
I think you touched on it, but let me ask specifically, has United Health Group taken every available action to immediately remove memory safety risk in its IT and software?
Sir, could you just repeat that, please? I couldn't hear the second part of the question.
He asked you to repeat it.
What?
Repeat it, your question.
Oh, refused to answer.
No, he just said he couldn't understand.
Oh.
Here.
Well,
So he just asked you to repeat the question.
has United Health Group taken every available action to immediately remove memory safety risks in its IT and software?
I'm not sure I completely understand the question around memory safety risk.
Okay.
I can assure you that since the attack...
Why don't you do this? Answer that question in writing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Happy to do so.
My understanding is that Change Healthcare touches 1 in 3 medical records in the United States. I'd like to better understand how Change Healthcare stores and manages patient data. How does Change Healthcare manage and store patient data? Where is the data stored? Is it stored by third parties? And at what point through processing, coding, and storing is patient data ever sent overseas?
So Change Healthcare stores data both on premises in data centers and also to a limited extent in the cloud. As we've rebuilt the technology environment, we have moved much more into the cloud, which we believe creates a much more secure future environment.
According to the FBI, there were 249 ransomware attacks against the healthcare industry in 2023. Has United Healthcare Group experienced another cyber attack since February 21?
I'd have to come back to you on that. We are under attack consistently. I'd like to make sure I'm accurate in how I respond to that question, and I'll be happy to come back to you with that.
In writing, okay. Do you feel like your company is prepared for another cyber attack? And this will be my last question.
Senator, thank you for that question. We are doing everything we can to be as prepared as possible, but we recognize the pressure of the attacks that come in. I believe that we are taking every sensible precaution, and we've brought in multiple third-party expert organizations to supplement our own teams. Where I hope we can also look for is ways in which we can start to reduce the attack pressure on the systems that we're all trying to manage.
Thank you, Senator Grassley. Senator Cassidy's next.
Mr. Witty, thank you for being here. And thanks for the conversations you and I've had prior to this. First, let me acknowledge, as I spoke, I'm a doc, as I spoke to doctors back home, the kind of worst case is passed, and many have said that it's resolved. So let me credit you for the hard work you've done. That does kind of present a different set of questions, please. One, you mentioned that United is waiving prior authorization, essentially, but Change handles lots of claims for other insurers. And as we know, sometimes prior auth is denied retroactively. So surgery will be approved, and then at a later point, it's unapproved, and the dollars are clawed back. Some of the docs say we don't know whether the shoe will drop in the future, whether it's a Cigna that will have a problem with the prior auth process, et cetera. To what degree has United worked with other insurers to address the uncertainty regarding prior authorization? And to what degree would United hold harmless the doc who is penalized, if you will, because of the damage done to the prior auth system through this from another insurer?
Senator Cassidy, thank you very much for the question, and I very much appreciated the time you've spared to talk through some of these issues with me, and I actually followed up after our last conversations on some of these. From a United Healthcare perspective, I'd like to confirm that when somebody applies for a prior authorization and it's granted, we never go back to contradict it. We never go back in time to change it if they've already acquired that. To your broader point, we are very, very supportive of efforts to modernize and enhance prior authorization in ways that can be much less burdensome on the system and much more effective in terms of ensuring patients get access to safe.
Yes, but as regards the other insurers in this particular process, if Change was an intermediary with Cigna, I keep using them because they come to mind, and there's an issue of prior auth, how will that be handled?
So in that situation, that would be a Cigna responsibility.
So has United reached out to Cigna to try and kind of, smooth it over kind of in this period in which changes, the ability of Change to provide that essential function has been brought down?
So thank you. I'm clearer with the question now. Let me reassure you that we've made clear that where people have acted in good faith during any outage, so, for example, a pharmaceutical was dispensed by a pharmacist without getting authorization. They thought that was okay. There was no system to check. We are honoring all of that.
Even if it's through Cigna?
We will cover that.
Then let me ask you, and this is a broader question and something for this committee to consider. In our conversations, and I gather on an earnings call, you pointed out that when asked about the breach, the cyber attack was paradoxically a validation of the size and scope of United's business practice. I've been told, Washington Post article, that 5% of U.S. GDP flows through United every day. Now, yes, but if you read somebody by Nicholas Taleb, he would say that the fact that you're so big and so dominant presents a special vulnerability. And that, yes, you have the deep pockets by which to address this, but the very fact that you're so big means it had a wide-ranging ripple effect that was outsized. And so I think for us, we would have to ask, is the dominant role of United too dominant because it's into everything, and messing up United messes up everybody?
Senator, thank you for the question. I think it's really important to be clear that the change, footprint, and activity was exactly the same on the day it was attacked from before it was acquired by United Health Group. It didn't change because of United Health Group.
Yes, but if we try, but I don't want to limit our imagination to just change. If 5% of our nation's GDP goes through United every day, then is there something else that could be incurred upon United that would have even farther reaching effects?
So as we look across the whole of United, we continue to be, as always, focused on how we defend and protect the organization. We look to how we can upgrade organizations.
That's not my point. My point is the size of United become it's almost a too big to fail insurer. Because if it fails, it's going to bring down far more than it ordinarily would.
I don't believe it is, because actually, despite our size, for example, we own no hospitals in America. We do not own any drug manufacturers.
But don't I know that y'all own like some incredible percentage of physician practices now?
Actually, we employ less than 10,000 physicians. Hospitals across America employ 400,000 physicians. We contract and affiliate with a further 80,000 physicians who voluntarily choose to work alongside our Optum colleagues. So we're very proud of the physicians who work for us, but oftentimes I think people confuse the affiliated and contracted physicians with the employed physicians, where we employ less than 1% of doctors in America.
I'm out of time. Thank you. I yield.
Senator Cassidy, this is an extraordinarily important issue that you're raising. This is classic too big to fail kind of policy. And I said a while back, I believe that the bigger the healthcare company, the bigger the responsibility to protect its systems from hackers. And I think there are going to be senators on both sides of the aisle who want to pursue what you're talking about, and I look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Let's see, our next person in order of appearance would be Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Witty, in 2023, United Health raked in a whopping $22 billion in profits, making you the most profitable healthcare company in the country. In fact, by revenue, United Health is the 11th largest company in the entire world. Now, Mr. Witty, United Health Group owns the country's largest insurer, the country's largest claims processor, the country's third largest pharmacy benefit manager, a huge pharmacy chain. It is the largest employer of physicians nationwide, or controller, with at least 90,000 physicians, as you just testified. That's about 1 out of every 10 doctors in the country. Is that correct about your size?
So just to thank you, Senator. As far as the physicians are concerned, we employ just under 10,000.
Well,
and
as
the
I
rest
said,
are
I think
affiliated.
you have control over about 90,000.
I would say not control. They choose to work with us.
Okay. Great. Because United Health has bought up every link in the healthcare chain, you are now in a position to jack up prices, squeeze competitors, hide revenues, and pressure doctors to put profits ahead of patients. United Health is a monopoly on steroids. The opportunities for price gouging are everywhere. For example, United Health is the biggest participant in Medicare Advantage, the government program that pays private insurers to administer Medicare benefits. With this web of subsidiaries, United Health is well positioned to rake in more taxpayer money by using a practice called upcoding to make enrollees look sicker. That is, noticing that a patient has a cane and adding a diagnosis of vascular disease to the medical chart, even if there's no clinical basis for the diagnosis and no treatment planned. Mr. Witty, according to a 2019 investigation by the HHS Inspector General, United Health was far and away the most aggressive abuser of upcoding practices. Do you know how much, according to the Inspector General, United Health cheated taxpayers out of in 2017?
Senator, thank you for the question. I'm not familiar with that particular piece of work.
Yeah, the number is $3.7 billion, and that's in just a single year, and that's from only 2 upcoding practices. You know, that was 5 years ago. Now, as we speak, is United Health under investigation from the DOJ for, among other things, your billing practices?
Senator, thank you for your question. We have a long-standing practice of not commenting on matters such as that or things like mergers and acquisitions.
Well, I understand why you might not want to comment on it. Public reporting from the Wall Street Journal confirms that it is, although your company has not disclosed this investigation. In fact, yesterday I sent the SEC a letter raising concerns about over $100 million in stock sales that United Health executives made in the days and weeks before the investigation was revealed by the press. And I'd like to make that part of the hearing record if I can, Mr. Chairman.
Objection to order.
Okay, so United Health is huge, and it boosts its multi-billion-dollar profits with, among other things, illegal billing tactics. And that takes me to the data breach. After the largest cyber attack on the healthcare industry in American history, quote, put hundreds of thousands of healthcare providers at risk of collapse, United Health is now using the crisis to expand its monopoly even further. For example, in Oregon, United Health tried to purchase a local physician practice, but faced enormous public opposition. After the data breach that we're talking about today, these doctors couldn't get reimbursed for their services, which pushes them to the financial breach. So, what did United Health do? They filed an emergency petition with regulators to allow them to acquire the doctor's practice on an expedited basis. Mr. Witty, will this acquisition make United Health even bigger?
Senator, thank you for your question. I'd just like to also put on the record that we, as an organization...
I had a very simple question. Will it make United Health, this giant, this 11th largest company in the entire world, even bigger?
As new organizations join us, the organization, I hope, becomes better as new physicians, for example, join.
The question is not better. We've already talked about your business practices. The question is bigger. Will it make United Health bigger?
As we grow, we become larger, yes.
Yeah, okay. So, you know, United Health is using its own data breach to snap up doctors' practices that have been driven to the edge of bankruptcy by that same data breach. It's no wonder that United Health told its shareholders that this data breach would have, quote, no material impact on the company's finances. United Health will stop at nothing to grow bigger, bigger, and bigger as we speak. United Health is trying to pick the bones of Stewart Health Care in my home state of Massachusetts, which was ruined by private equity and corporate greed. It is time for regulators to say no to these efforts to get bigger and to suck even more health dollars away from patients and providers who need it. For the sake of our patients, our doctors and nurses, and the American taxpayer, it is time to break up the United Health monopoly.
The time of my colleague has expired. Next in order of appearance would be Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now for a different perspective. The largest financial entity in the world is the United States federal government. We'll spend close to $7 trillion this year, and I kind of view the 535 members of Congress as the board of directors. So this board of directors has allowed this largest financial entity to incur $35 trillion worth of debt. The largest financial entity in the world gets hacked all of the time. Last year, according to GAO, we had $236 billion of improper payments through all these government programs run by the largest financial entity in the world. So again, I just want to put a little balance here. I'll state the obvious. United Health, you were a victim of a crime, correct?
That is correct, sir.
I'm actually sympathetic with people who are victims of crime. I don't think you went out and sought to be hacked. I mean, what I was hoping this hearing be more about is, you utilize your experience to figure out what went wrong so that other people watching this can try and correct it. And as we sat down yesterday, I appreciate you taking the time meeting with me, talking about Change Healthcare. There was one server that didn't have dual authentication. That was the source of the breach. And again, the cyber attackers are very sophisticated, and they exploit those weaknesses. This is a weakness that's very well known. I mean, most hacks occur because of those types of security breaches that, again, in a large entity, it's hard to police all that. Can you just kind of describe, first of all, the history of Change Healthcare, how it built, why you bought it, what it's supposed to function?
Senator, thank you for the question. So Change Healthcare grew over about 40 years through a series of its own acquisitions and organic growth to become a network connector across the healthcare system. It's probably one of 4 or 5 companies who do the same kind of thing.
And the same kind of thing is processes payments,
Process
correct?
claims, send claims from providers to payers, and then send payment back. Exactly.
And a reasonably complex thing to do.
Highly complex.
And, with Medicare rules and insurance rules. I mean, it's a complex thing to do.
Exactly, and importantly, it's a software and network business, not a pipeline business in a physical sense. So when it's attacked, the vulnerability is that the software is impacted or encrypted, and that really freezes the whole system, which is why this has been such a devastating impact.
So within this wholly owned subsidiary of United that you purchased that had been built up over years through private equity, there was either one group or one, I mean, describe exactly where the vulnerability was.
Yes, so we were in the process of upgrading the technology that we'd acquired, but within there was a server which I'm incredibly frustrated to tell you was not protected by MFA. That was the server through which the cyber criminals were able to get into Change, and then they led off a ransomware attack, if you will, which encrypted and froze large parts of the system.
And you found out, I mean, you found when your IT people were aware of the breach, you were notified immediately, and you contacted the FBI within a couple hours, correct?
All on the same day. So February 21, I was told, I was at a board meeting, they came in and told me on February 21, and we called the FBI the same day.
But you had probably been breached how soon before that?
We think in hindsight, we didn't know at the time, but as we've gone back and done the forensics, we believe they entered probably 9 days before.
And my previous work on Homeland Security, I think it's averages about a couple hundred days. The hackers are actually inside the system exploring it for the vulnerabilities before all of a sudden they're made known. So again, again, these are sophisticated actors here. What was your response then? I mean, what did you do?
The minute we knew about this, in fact, even before I'd been briefed, our team had followed the right steps and disconnected Change from all other connections because it was critical to prevent the infection affecting any other provider or network in the country. That worked. We know that did not happen, so we contained the blast radius to just Change. And then
So you shut down the system?
We shut down the whole thing.
Obviously denying your customers payment, and you've admitted that, you could have handled that better.
Yes.
Again, this is hard. You're dealing with very difficult things to do here. But then you established this interest-free loan program in general. I mean, percentage of your customers, how many are satisfied with your response to this versus the ones that are still pretty upset with you?
So, Senator, first of all, you're right. We didn't get it right first time in the first week or so. We quickly changed that. And I think since then we've had extraordinary uptake from folks across the country. And I believe, certainly judging by the correspondence I get from small providers in particular, how grateful they are, not just for the loan, but for the ease with which it was provided. Usually in just hours or overnight, they've been able to be supported. And we continue to issue those loans today, even though we believe the overall system is back to normal, because we do know some people have not been paid yet.
Well, thanks for your testimony. Thanks for allowing yourself to be subjected to this. Thank you.
Senator, thank you.
I'm going to go to the senator from Nevada in just a second, but I want to also make sure, because you've been all over the map with respect to personal accountability, and you have consistently downplayed your role in this. And your head of cybersecurity told us last week, about this, and we still need to know whether you knew that you didn't have MFA. Did you know that?
On this server in Change? No,
Yes.
absolutely not.
Why not?
Well, so as the company had only relatively recently come into the group, it was in the process of being upgraded.
But why wasn't it the first thing you would do?
So my understanding is that when Change came into the organization, there was extensive amount of modernization required, and unfortunately, and very frustratingly, this server had not had MFA deployed on it prior to the attack.
But you coming in would say, we've got to deal with this. I mean, this is the first server. This is not an abstract issue. Senator from Nevada.
Thank you. Mr. Witty, let me follow up on some of the line of questioning here. You paid a ransomware, correct, to the hackers?
That's correct.
How much?
$22 million.
And the information that the hackers obtained, was that identifiable patient information?
We believe, yes, they exfiltrated PII and PHI. Yes.
And that's the most personal information, healthcare information individuals would
Yes.
provide to you, correct? And don't you have an obligation to protect that information?
We certainly do, and we take that obligation very seriously. And of course, we're incredibly frustrated by this attack.
And by law, you're required actually to protect that information, both state law and federal law, correct?
That is correct, and we take that obligation very seriously.
And under that same law, you're also required to notify those affected partners and patients that their data, their personal data, has been compromised, correct?
Yes, Senator.
And you haven't done that yet, is that right?
No, we're still working.
How long is that going to take you?
So we think that will still take several more weeks to finish the data analysis to understand what is there.
And you've been saving several more weeks since, what, this attack was how long ago, 69 days ago?
Yes, and thank you for the question. We only were able to start this process about a month after the attack when we got the data set back and were able to deal with, start to interrogate it. It's a very complex process. We're trying.
Is it complex because you have so much patient data that it is hard to actually identify all of it?
No, it's more a complexity of the data structure and making sure that we get it right and making sure that we're notifying people of the correct information.
So as we sit here today, there are many patients who do not know their healthcare information has been compromised, so they can't put protections in place to protect themselves against identity theft. Is that correct?
So we have not yet been able to notify people, but we have not
so
waited.
So let me jump to something else that is happening that I'm hearing in my state. Nevada Health Centers is a federally qualified health center with locations across the state of Nevada, and they rely on Change Healthcare for real-time patient eligibility verification. I am hearing, despite portals being back online, that critical provider and patient information is often missing or mismatched, with nearly 50% of payer information being inaccurate. Health Centers seeks clarity on when these systems will be corrected, but have struggled to get a reliable answer from United Healthcare Group. So I'm hoping you can provide that clarity. When will the real-time eligibility and benefits verification functions of the Change Healthcare Network be up to date and accurate?
Thank you for that question. If I may, I will come back to you today with that information. I do not have that with me right now.
Okay, so I hope you do, because not just my healthcare centers, but across the country, many are asking this question. And for that reason, you're aware that providers must adhere to timely filing deadlines set by insurance companies for claim reimbursement. If they miss these deadlines, insurers may deny payment, leading to delayed patient care and increased provider burden. The recent Change Healthcare hack requiring United Healthcare to take its systems down for a week undoubtedly poses challenges for providers in meeting these deadlines. Will you commit to extending United Health Plan's filing deadlines for any claims affected by the Change Healthcare hack and subsequent system outage?
Yes, absolutely.
And will you agree to extend the filing deadlines for claims filed before the February 21st cyber attack, considering that the appeals processes for these claims have been disrupted by United Health Group systems outage?
Again, we're happy to do whatever's necessary to make this impact as minimal as possible for the provider, yes.
That would be a yes, thank you. So let me also address this. I am concerned about the lasting effects of United Healthcare Group's cybersecurity failure on the health sector. Providers that I am hearing from have faced dramatic drops in revenue and are missing out on interest from delayed payments. In Nevada, one health center reports spending $12,000 every week on overtime for staff who are dealing with the billing and eligibility issues caused by this Change Healthcare outage. For many small providers in my state, missing just 2 payments could force their foreclosure. So my question to you is, what steps will United Health Group take to compensate providers for the administrative costs they are incurring due to this cyber attack?
So thank you very much for the question. First and foremost, we continue to make available the interest-free loans, and secondly, more than willing to engage with individual providers on their circumstances as you described.
Interest-free loans will address these administrative issues, or are there conditions upon the interest-free loans or burdens that they have to respond?
There are no conditions on the interest-free loans other than that they would be repaid 45 days after the provider has confirmed that they are back to normal.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Witty. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank my colleague. Senator Tillis is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here. Mr. Witty, when I'm trying to get, I know people have asked questions about your redundancy plan and multi-factor authentication. Can you give me some sense as to whether or not either internal or external audits identified this as a compliance or audit risk in the past?
For MFA on this?
I've got to believe that anybody, any qualified internal or external auditor on systems controls would have identified multi-factor authentication not being in use as a major risk factor. Do you know if there's a record out there that management would have been made aware of?
Of this particular server?
Yeah.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. It'd be interesting for the record if we can find any information from either your internal audit or external audit if that was identified as an actionable matter. Tell me a little bit about redundancy, too. I used to work in redundancy, building redundant systems, cutover systems. It sounds like it was not a very smooth cutover. So how did that not make it through a system audit as well?
Thank you very much for the question. So I agree with you that it's very frustrating that there wasn't a quick redundancy switchover. The attack.
I mean, you are an information technology provider at a large scale.
That's right. So within Change Healthcare, which again was a company that had only recently come into our organization and was in the process of being upgraded, the attack itself implicated both the prime and the backup environments. And that was partly due to the age of the technology and the fact that large amounts of it were not in the cloud. The elements which were in the cloud, we were able to bring back almost immediately.
Yeah.
The elements which were in the older data centers and had within them multi-layers of historic legacy technologies, that was the challenge on the restarts. And
well, I brought, I actually brought in, I used to bring this to when I was on Senate Armed Services. I had to give up Senate Armed Services to get on finance, but I always brought this book in when we had cyber attacks. It's called Hacking for Dummies. This is the 5th edition. It doesn't include the nature of the breach that you all developed, but this is some basic stuff that was missed. So shame on internal audit, external audit, and your systems folks tasked with redundancy. They're not doing their job. And as a result, we have a data breach where I've said in Judiciary Committee, this is the first meeting I've had where we're talking about data privacy, data breach since I've been on finance, but I really do believe it's your problem to fix, and the damage to the consumer's data is you got to keep them whole. That enterprise, your entire enterprise is based on the movement of data, movement and exchange of data. That's how you create value. My health records, the health records of people that are moving. So when you have a breach, it's got to be your problem, not my problem. And so everything that you do to keep those folks' information, those folks whole for any damage in the brief, I think is just a function of doing business. Do you agree with that?
I do so, and we've lent in to take full responsibility on notification, and we aren't waiting for that notification. We've already stood up credit protection, identity theft protection for anybody who can, and they can reach us through a 1-800 number or through our cyber support.
It raises interesting challenges about timeline, et cetera, but we'll submit some questions for the record about just how long you're willing to make that commitment and how easy it is. I, for one, do not want, I got a notice, on possibly being involved in data breach, and it was kind of interesting, say, we will help you with your problem. And I'm thinking, no, I will help you with your problem, right, but you're not going to make this difficult for consumers, and we'll be keeping track. And I'm talking to those folks. I'm going to take at face value, you're going to do it right. But this is not the problem of the person who now may have to deal with the consequences of the use of their data. It's got to be your problem to fix. But Mr. Chair, I just want to bring up, I hope that we can get back. If you remember about 3 or 4 years ago, after Europe passed the GDPR, which is data privacy, data breach, everybody was talking about how Congress needed to act on that. And Congress has done nothing, in part because it's a multi-jurisdictional issue that wades into commerce, wades into judiciary. I think there's a third committee as well. We are making a huge mistake by not having federal rules of the road on data privacy, data breach, and how these enterprises have to mitigate things. And we've really got to work on it, because now we've got a patchwork of over a dozen states that are doing it differently. And I think it creates distraction and cost for the businesses that take them away from actually protecting our data. So hopefully we can work on this. It's a very critical subject, and I'm all about making sure that the people whose data has been captured are kept whole. Thank you.
Senator Tillis, a couple of very important points you make. The last one, in terms of bringing together the various committees, is essential. I don't want to leave, though, the other important point that you make. Multi-factor authentication is vital for prevention, but redundancy, which you touched on, basically helps the company get back on its feet. This company flunked both, and I thank you for it.
I agree, Mr. Chair.
Senator Langford.
Chairman, thank you. Mr. Witty, thanks for being here. And there's a lot of conversations happening around this dais. I appreciate our phone call that we had a couple of days ago just to be able to talk through some of these things in greater depth. I do want to tell you a story getting started that's, I'm going to combine several people together just to be able to tell you a story for an Oklahoman that lives in a rural area. She's in her mid-70s. Several years ago, she used to go to her local physician, but that local physician practice has closed down because of just the administrative burden. They couldn't keep it going. So now she drives to a hospital. It's about 30 minutes away to be able to meet with a doctor there. The hospital and that physician is on her insurance. She has Medicare Advantage. But by the time she actually scheduled an appointment, she actually lined up the appointment and found out, no, they just switched off. They're no longer on Medicare Advantage. But they were when she originally signed up for the plan. Then when she finally goes to the doctor on that, she gets there. The doctor needs to run some tests, but she can't get the test done that day because they have to do a prior authorization with the insurance company. So she has to drive home. When it's a test that she needs, they could do that day, but they can't do that day because they're waiting on prior authorization to be able to go through. The hard part is 2 years later, that hospital has just stopped taking Medicare Advantage at all, as we've had several of our hospitals do in Oklahoma, saying that just the realized reimbursement is 20% less than Medicare. They just can't keep up with Medicare Advantage because all the prior authorizations and because all the denial of service. So they've just stopped taking Medicare Advantage entirely, which for her really puts her out in a difficult spot. She goes to her local pharmacist that she's gone to for years and finds out that there's pretty remarkable pressure on them and they're going to have a hard time. They're not sure they're going to be able to stay open. But her insurance company tells her, hey, we want you to do mail order pharmaceuticals, but she has pretty complicated chronic diseases and she wants to have somebody that she can talk to. I wish this was a story that wasn't true, but it is. And it's the complications. Now, you've been engaged and United's engaged in all of those areas, both in the PBMs, both in Medicare Advantage. This is not a story just on United. This is just a reality that we're facing here, especially in rural areas. And in my state of 4 million people, 2 million people live in an urban area and 2 million people live in a rural area. So it's a reality for those folks that live in a rural area of those exact challenges that I laid out. I'm not asking you to answer all of those. I guess I'm just saying those so you'll hear it, because that really is a reality of what's happening on the ground every day in rural Oklahoma. And they're just want to get health care and want to just be able to get access to that. I do want to clarify something you and I talked about. It is when hospitals and pharmacies will be made whole after all of the issues of the reimbursements when everything's done. When is that target time when everyone will be made completely whole?
Senator, thank you very much. Just on your first comment, if I may,
Sure.
I'm 100% aligned with the aspiration you described there in terms of how we can help modernize the system. And clearly that is not for one company, and it's a government, state, company obligation. We do need to reduce, for example, burnout of physicians. We need to make it easier for seniors like the lady you described in Oklahoma to navigate this system. We need to be able to provide that help. And we need to make sure that the system is timely and responsive in how it helps those folks so that they get access as quickly as possible. That's what drives every single person at United to try and improve. And we are very open to ideas and suggestions of how we can improve. That's why, for example, just in the last year, we've eliminated 20% of all of the prior authorization codes which existed a year ago. Right. So I just want to reassure you of our commitment and our sentiment to do exactly what you're looking for in terms of helping to streamline the system.
It'd be very helpful. And I know, as we've talked about offline as well, there are families that they do sign up with a specific plan because they know their physician and their hospital is in that plan, and they sign up in October, November, but when they make their appointment in January or February, they suddenly find out, no, that just switched. It switched over in January, though they signed up for it in October. They need to know that if they sign up for a physician, that physician's going to actually be there.
I certainly agree with you, sir, and provider directories is one of the key areas which we all need to try and work together to be better at. In terms of making whole, we continue to make sure that the interest-free loan funding capacity remains available for people all the way through completion of this, and we'll work with individual providers on other issues that they're concerned about.
What do you think is the date when everyone's made whole?
I would hope that that's in the next month or 6 weeks.
Okay. That'll be helpful for all those providers. You and I can talk later on this one, but any specific ideas on the other side of this that the FBI can have? As you know, I serve on the Homeland Security Committee as well as your own finance, so I'm dealing with both sides of this ransomware attack. Things that the FBI could have done better, things that would have been more helpful proactively or information, that would be helpful. So if any of the folks in your company want to be able to pull together a list, that we can help work on that side of it as well.
We'd be very happy.
Thank you.
The time of my friend has expired. As reluctant as I am to break up this friendship here, we've got so many people coming and going. Senator Brown, you were next, and then I very much want to get Senator Casey in very quickly, but if we kind of keep breaking this up, it's going to be bedlam here. Senator Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Witty, welcome. Glad you're here. In addition to being a large insurance company, UHG also owns and operates a PBM, as you know, Optium RX, which tells you a lot about the problems going on in our healthcare system. I hear from so many independent pharmacy owners in Ohio who are forced to make impossible decisions, including considering dropping out of Medicare Part D, even having to close their doors entirely. A couple who runs 5 pharmacies came to me. They've shut down because of PBMs. The same story, driving up costs through abusive practices like imposing punitive direct and indirect remuneration or DIR fees on pharmacies. Were you aware, Mr. Witty, that in a recent National Community Pharmacies Association survey of independent pharmacy owners and managers, over 1/3 reported they're considering closing this year due to financial constraints? Are you aware of that?
I am certainly aware of similar research, yes.
Okay, thank you. Do you acknowledge that PBM played a significant role in at least some of those closures?
So thank you for the question. From our PBM at Optum RX, we're actually, for example, we do not have DIR fees. We are not doing any.
Well, back to the question. Do you acknowledge that PBMs play a significant role in some of those closures?
I don't necessarily believe that to be the case. I think the PBMs provide a very significant service in a variety of support to clients who are looking for.
Well, sorry to cut you off. I have only 5 minutes. It's clear that DIR fees contribute to local pharmacy closures. As I said, I just met with 2 Ohio pharmacists last week, forced to close their stores. They are in rural areas, 5 pharmacies in 5 different communities where people in those communities will have to drive at least 5 or 10 miles. They had record sales, but PBM practices meant they can't even break even. It's clear that the PBM your company owns is making massive amounts of money. You know that. I assume you've probably bragged about that. Last year, PBM reported revenues of $116 billion. So it's pretty clear you could lower, eliminate those fees and still be making plenty of money. Will you commit today in front of the Chairman Wyden in this committee to lower and, when possible, eliminate DRI fees to save community pharmacists in Ohio and across the country?
Senator Brown, we have already eliminated DIR fees and absolutely happy to commit.
Will you help us in the industry convince some of your colleagues to do the same?
To the extent that we're able or allowed to do that, we will certainly encourage that direction.
Okay, it's clear that a number of PBMs are not going to reform on their own. It's why we urgently need to pass this legislation, Mr. Chairman, to rein in these corporate middlemen, and we need to pass it this Congress. Moving on to something Mr. Langford was talking about, this cyber attack put a financial burden on the doctors and hospitals, pharmacies, and health systems in Ohio due to disrupted payments, and particularly community health centers are facing some of the most dire consequences from this attack. You know how important community health centers are in Pennsylvania and Ohio and Idaho and Oregon. They serve patients, often the most vulnerable. They operate on slim margins. There's a health center in my hometown of Mansfield, Ohio, whose revenue dropped from an average of $600,000 a week to under $200,000 a week due to this attack. Unacceptable, of course. Health systems can't continue to operate like this without certainty that they'll be compensated for these kinds of losses. What is United's plan to compensate providers and health systems who are bearing these additional financial burdens because of this breach?
So thank you for the question. So in the context of the family health center you describe in Mansfield, in that situation, we have our interest-free loan program. Over $2 billion have gone to family health centers like the ones you describe, and we'd be very happy to reach out to your office. And if that particular provider has not yet taken advantage of that program, it is still available, and it would bridge the gap in the cash flow that you described.
And these loans, though, will be required to pay back?
Only when they are fully back to normal and all backlogs have been cleared, and they, not me, but they confirm that their cash flow is normalized.
They will make the determination of back to normal?
Correct, and then they will have 45 business days to then start the repayment, so 2 calendar months.
And low-interest loans precisely means what?
No interest,
no interest.
No interest, no fee.
Thank you.
Senator Casey, fortunately.
Mr. Chairman, thanks very much. Mr. Witty, good to be with you. In public statements, United Healthcare claims that the vast majority of services has been restored to pre-cyber attack levels. You spoke about the company's efforts to make providers whole. I continue to hear, however, from providers in Pennsylvania who are struggling to serve their patients as they await reimbursement for the care they're providing. Dr. Christine Meyer, who owns a practice in Exton, Pennsylvania, the southeastern part of our state, initially looked into taking out a home equity loan to keep her practice afloat. She reached out to United Healthcare to participate in your loan program, but she was only offered $4,000 a month, which would cover 0.8% of her monthly expenses. Now, months later, she's finally received, I should say, a more generous loan from Optum, but she's worried about the repayment terms. She said the terms are unclear, and she's worried that she'll have to pay back these loans before her practice is fully up and running. Would you commit to supporting providers like Dr. Meyer by delaying the deadline for their loan repayment until the backlog of claims has been cleared regardless of the time frame?
Senator Casey, thank you for the question. Let me first off apologize to Dr. Meyer for the delay in getting the right level of loan capacity to them. And in the effort to move quickly here, we recognize we didn't get it right always at the very beginning of this process. I think we've improved that dramatically, and that's why I'm sure she was able to get the kind of full loan she has. I'd like to absolutely confirm to you and Dr. Meyer that we have no intention of asking for loan repayment until after she determines that her business is back to normal. And even then, we would not look for repayment until 45 business days, 60 calendar days after that. And there would be no interest and no fee associated with that loan.
So it would be a determination she makes?
That's absolutely right.
And secondly, I wanted to ask you about the risk, especially when in the context of children and seniors, when the obvious risk when health care or financial information is breached. In the context of a child, the child's data is stolen. It can be a blank slate for cyber criminals to open up bank accounts and apply for loans, and it can take, obviously, years, if not longer, to repair the damage. For seniors, for older adults, whose rates of victimization from scams has been skyrocketing in recent years, a data breach means even more of their information is available to scammers to use against them in the future. United Healthcare still hasn't notified any victims of this cyber attack. It's been more than 2 months, but according to the company's website, it will take, quote, several months, unquote, to identify and notify impacted consumers, or customers, I should say, and individuals. And I think it's clear that if United had stronger defenses like multi-factor authentication, then this could have gone very differently. At the same time, United is growing and expanding. It's lacking adequate and protective cybersecurity infrastructure to secure people's most private information. So I'd ask you this in 2 questions. One is in the context of a parent. Parents who are worried about their child's personal and private health information being out there in the world for the rest of their lives, what would you say to those parents?
Senator Casey, first off, I'm very sorry that this situation has happened and it has been a data theft. We are working incredibly hard to get that information and working with regulators to get notification as fast as possible. We've also done everything we can to try and minimize the possibility of that data in fact leaking out at all. I just want to reassure any parent, any individual, already today, prior to notification, anybody in America can call us or come onto our cyber support website for change, and already the service is available to provide 2 years credit protection, 2 years identity theft protection. It's as simple as making the call to 1-866-262-5342. If you ring that number, within the first few seconds of that, folks will offer those services. It's a very straightforward thing to do, available to anybody.
Thanks. I'm out of time, but I will submit one question for the record. Thank you.
Senator Casey, before you leave, I just appreciate your standing up for families. And we're going to have some more discussion of this because I happen to think, Mr. Witty, credit monitoring is the thoughts and prayers of data breaches. This is absolutely inefficient, and I'm going to ask some more additional questions here shortly. Senator Hassan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Crapo, for this hearing, and thank you, Mr. Witty, for being here today. Following the February cyber attack on your subsidiary company, I heard from New Hampshire hospitals that saw nearly all of their revenue disappear overnight. You and I subsequently had a series of discussions about the need for United Health to provide financial assistance to hospitals under fair terms. While this shouldn't have been necessary in the first place, I appreciated your work to change the terms of United Health's assistance program to provide fair relief options to these hospitals during what was an unprecedented crisis, though there is a long road ahead to return to normal operations. So I have a couple of questions, and I'm hoping we can get through them. Let me start by following up on a question that Senator Cortez Masto asked. In United Health's April 22nd press release, the company stated that personal information for, quote, a substantial proportion of people in America, close quote, millions of families, was likely obtained by cyber criminals in the attack on your subsidiary company. Under HIPAA, covered entities whose data have been breached are required to notify individuals and the HHS secretary within 60 days of when health information is known or reasonably believed, and I'm emphasizing those 2 words, reasonably believed to be exposed in a hack. In other words, when in doubt, you have to notify people who may have been affected by the breach. However, you have just testified that United Health has not yet notified individuals or the HHS secretary that sensitive health information was compromised. To meet your HIPAA obligations, you need to at least send preliminary notifications to individuals so that they can take protective actions like monitoring their bank accounts, changing passwords, and enrolling in the credit monitoring system that United Healthcare has set up. When specifically will United Health send this initial notification to all possibly affected people? And will this information about the, will the notice include information about the credit monitoring that you are offering?
Senator, thank you for the question. Could I also thank you for the way you advocated for the hospitals and helped us understand where we needed to improve our terms and conditions? I appreciated that. In regard to your question, this is our top priority, to go as fast as we can to understand this. Of course, what we're trying to get here is to make sure that the information and the people we communicate with is right first and foremost. We're working with regulators to understand how best to do that. We were held up in the process because it took time to get the original data set back. We only got hold of that in mid-March. We are working on that, and we're working with regulators on how to do exactly as you described.
All right, so let me just, I'm going to push you a little bit on this because the attack happened on February 21st. The HIPAA deadline for reporting to the agency and to individuals was April 21st. It's now May 1st. 10 weeks is way too long for millions of Americans to not know that their records may be available to criminals on the dark web. So I really urge you to immediately notify any families that could have been affected so that they can take proactive steps. And I also urge you to use United Health's substantial resources to do more for patients who were exposed in this hack, including by offering comprehensive identity protections to individuals beyond the 2 years of credit monitoring that you're offering right now, to Senator Wyden's point. Second question. In cybersecurity, a single point of failure refers to a piece of IT infrastructure that, if it fails, can lead to the breakdown of an entire critical system, such as payments to healthcare providers. Healthcare providers want to have contingency plans to be better prepared for system failures. Some in New Hampshire have told me that they're no longer comfortable with the risk of relying on a single system for processing their payments. Yet United Health Group includes exclusivity terms in at least some of its Change Healthcare contracts. These terms prohibit providers from working with other companies that process healthcare payments. So is it true that your contracts include exclusivity clauses?
So the legacy change, some of the legacy Change Healthcare did, and we are releasing those so that people can indeed adopt redundant pathways.
Okay, I think it's important that you make sure that future contracts do not have these exclusivity terms, because they can effectively create single points of failure. I guess the next piece of this, I think you've answered. So are you agreeing right now you won't use exclusivity clauses in future contracts?
Senator, that's right. Because we agree with you that having business redundancy is an important backup to technological risk.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Hassan. And I noted in the discussion in preparing for this hearing that you were one of the first to kind of blow the whistle on some of these major issues. And I commend you and look forward to working with you. This committee is going to be actively involved, and we're going to make a bipartisan effort, which has been a forte of my colleague from New Hampshire. And I look forward to working with her and all of our colleagues. Senator Warner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you and the ranking member holding this hearing. As you know, November 2022, we put out a white paper on the need to have some level of overview and people in charge in terms of cyber and healthcare. And I'd love to submit for the record
without objection, Senator Warner's statement
this chart, which indicates, frankly, cyber and healthcare is dealt with by 4 separate secretariats and about 12 different entities. And I think this lack of clarity is one of the challenges. I feel very strongly, and I appreciate that Chairman's already, I think, alluded to this, and I want to hear from you, Mr. Witty. I know we discussed this when we met individually, is no industry likes minimum standards, but just as we put in energy and in finance, minimum cybersecurity standards, I think we need those minimum standards in healthcare as well. I think you've tended to agree, but if we were to put those minimum standards in place, I would want to make sure, particularly whether we're talking about Change or we're talking about Big United, that there be transparency in those standards. Can you speak to this subject?
Senator Warner, thank you very much. Yes, certainly I do think, and we're supportive of a direction of travel which moves towards minimum standards. I think today there is a blend of guidance, some standards and others, and I think there needs to be clarity within that. As you rightly say, there are a mix of different oversight agencies. I think that's, as you think about smaller and medium-sized organizations across healthcare, it's difficult oftentimes to navigate some of those things. So I do think a refreshed view of all of that. I think minimum standards do make sense. We'd be very, very happy to engage, and any lessons learned from this with you on that.
And one of the things I think we need is, people wouldn't be surprised if an individual provider was attacked or the United parent being a huge entity. But, my understanding of change is, in effect, they were the rails that folks didn't understand, allowed the doc or the insurer and provider to kind of communicate information better. I think if we think about these minimum standards, it has to be all the way up and down the food chain. You can't just check a box and say, well, as a provider, I'm covered. We've got to go trace back that through that whole supply chain in a way that, again, quite honestly, I'm not sure we have enough transparency in the system overall. I also believe, and I think we said, since this was multi-factor authentication problem, you guys are the biggest in the business. And the fact that I know you had acquired Change, you were 2 years into the acquisition, and you still had not put the type of standards that United Corporate would already have in place into Change. Why was it taking so long?
Senator, thank you for that question. That is very much still, we're trying to dig through exactly why that server had not been protected by multi-factor authentication. I'm as frustrated as anybody about that fact, and we are working to try and understand exactly why it was not covered at the time.
Well, Mr. Chairman, this is one of those areas where if we don't have, I think, resilience. I mean, I've got providers that have not only gone through literally weeks of not being able to have payments made and lost such faith in Change that they are now talking about getting a new provider. That adds more and more weeks. In the meantime, patients, providers, others are not getting their payments made. So I think we need to look not only at a minimum standard system, but also how we build resiliency into this system. I think the whole business model here, if any entity that is providing, in effect, the connections, from a telecom guy, as I used to be, those connections between docs, providers, insurers, there's got to be a backup system in place. And whether that means within a single provider like Change/United, you'd have a backup system, or whether the whole model, business model has to change so that whoever you sign up, you have a backup in reserve, because without that, you've got the kind of crisis that the system has prevented here. So you said you were going to try to change that model. Can you speak to that for a moment? I know my
totally.
time's
So, Senator, certainly agree with that sentiment, and which is we would encourage people to have backup systems. Those providers who had two alternatives, they were able to fail across to their backups and were able to carry on without interruption, essentially. Some did not have those backups. We need to work with those providers to make that possible and help them to be able to have that second pipeline, if you will, or that second rail, which would allow them to have failed across to that if there'd been a technology failure on the first system.
Well, I know, Mr. Chairman, you want to take on this issue, and I look forward to working with you. I know Senator Cassidy's interested, but I think this is a time that's well overdue. We were just waiting for a crisis like this to happen, and we knew it was going to happen. Now I think we need to act. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think those points are well taken, Senator Warner, and I think that there's an opportunity to link up a number of these issues. As I understand it, your proposal is essentially a Medicare-related kind of effort. We have begun working, the Finance Committee staff, which is available, of course, to all of the members, because we have jurisdiction over the HIPAA security rule as well, which gives us a chance to look at some of these issues relating to enforcement and standards and accountability. And I think your point as it relates to kind of resiliency allows us, and we've started it this morning, to kind of walk through how all of this actually works. I mean, you can't walk into a coffee shop in most of America and talk about multi-factor authentication. I mean, everybody would just kind of look at you kind of, what planet have you descended from? But that's all about prevention. But Senator Tillis came in and gave us a chance to make a link between prevention and getting everybody up and running again quickly, which is what the redundancy effort is all about. So as we link up these issues and work in a bipartisan way, there's lots to do, and I look forward to working with my colleague. All right, let's see, next we would have Senator Barrasso.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for being with us today. Since the Change Healthcare cyber attack, I've heard from hospitals, providers all across Wyoming, and I'm sure you've heard from people all across the country. Sheridan Memorial Hospital, Sheridan, Wyoming, shared with me how the attack has impacted them and their patients. So it took 26 days for the claim processing to be restored at Sheridan Memorial. Like thousands of other hospitals, they experienced financial hits that are going to take them months from which to recover. Over the 26 days, they were delayed in filing 17,000 claims, resulted in about $20 million in unpaid services. Rural hospitals all across Wyoming and the U.S. provide access to essential health services. You know, they represent the most financially vulnerable hospitals because when a hospital closes, it's usually a rural hospital. So 50% of rural hospitals already operating right now in the red. This breach may send some of them into a financial spiral for which they can't come back, and those communities are often rural frontier areas. There's not a hospital, another hospital nearby. So how are you prioritizing the processing of claims?
Senator, thank you very much for the question, and let me say how sorry I am to hear the kind of pressure that you just described. And please be assured we're working everything we can to make sure that we're as responsive as possible, not just to claims clearance, but also to make sure that there is loan programs available, particularly for rural hospitals and family health centers. And about a third of the $6.5 billion we've issued have gone to those types of organizations. And if there are specific hospitals within Wyoming who have not yet connected with us, I would encourage them to do so. Claims processing is broadly back to normal. So we believe most of the backlog on claims processing is mostly back. Obviously, I cannot assert for 100%, but I think broadly. Where we still have lag is payment on those claims. So, for example, if a claim is submitted to United Healthcare, our insurance company, for payment, we will pay it instantly. But not all payers are paying instantly. So some may be paying as normal 30 days after claim receipt. That would explain why you're continuing to see that delay. We're committed to maintaining that interest-free loan capacity for folks until they have got through this cash flow challenge.
Yeah, because we want to make sure you're specifically prioritizing these rural and financially vulnerable hospitals because they need to keep their doors open and they're the only source of supply. I mean, there's been a lot of discussion about two-factor verification today. We have a small community hospital. They have a health fair I tend to try to get to every year. Kemmer, Wyoming, town of 2,500 people. 2023, they spent nearly $1 million on cybersecurity. It's evident from how much hospitals like our South Lincoln County Hospital spend that hospitals take cybersecurity very seriously. Change Healthcare's commitment to cybersecurity, it's not as clear. We've had just about every person here ask those questions. I've heard the responses that you've had. To me, it seems like an excuse. South Lincoln Medical Hospital in Kemmer even has this multi-factor authentication. They're operating in the red. And Change Healthcare was established in 2007. This was a hospital that was established in 1961, and this is a system that has been already updated. So did you lack the financial resources to implement a multifactorial authentication system? I'm just not sure why you haven't had this in place yet.
Senator, thank you for the question. And like you, I'm very disappointed and frustrated that this particular server did not have MFA installed. The Change Healthcare came into our group a little over 1.5 years ago. We've been upgrading their technology since we acquired it. You're right, they were established 2007, but some of the legacy systems in that company go back 40 years. We've been working to improve those, and unfortunately, we have discovered a server which was not covered by MFA and as a result, was exploited.
So have you implemented the requirements since the breach?
Oh, absolutely. So we have a policy at United Health Group for MFA on external services. We are using external support to ensure we have all those in place. We run continuous penetration tests to make sure that they're active. But in this is a very frustrating situation, which we're continuing to try and investigate to understand why it was like it was.
You know, I practiced orthopedic surgeon in Wyoming for 25 years. We had a small group practice, 5 to 6 physicians, and the small group practices are getting hit as well, in addition to the larger practices. You have any plan to change policies to ensure that providers aren't financially on the hook in the future?
We certainly... So I think importantly, we're providing really unlimited loan support for folks to get through this cash flow situation. And of course, we're always willing to talk to providers on a case-by-case basis if there are other issues that need to be addressed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Barrasso, before you go, I want to associate myself with your remarks because this is so important as it relates to these small families. And we've been at it for about 2 hours. And I think you touch on what I regard as one of the key areas, and we've just heard excuse after excuse this morning from Mr. Witty. And the fact is that first server that was hacked did not have multi-factor authentication, and Mr. Witty's head of cybersecurity knew about it. So we got to get to the bottom of it. This is going to be a completely bipartisan effort. We hadn't had any senators saying, let's get a Democratic bill or a Republican bill. We're going to do this together. I very much appreciate the important issues you've raised.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Let's see. Senator Bennett is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Witty, for being here today. I have similar issues that I want to talk about in terms of Colorado. I'm very grateful that the chairman and the ranking member has held this. Mr. Witty, I appreciate the initial efforts that that UHG has made to accelerate payments and to offer some financial assistance. This is obviously affecting cash flows all across the state. We've got patients in Colorado that are continuing to need care. And since the hack, my office has been working with offices all over the state. They're still 2 or 3 months away from their normal cash flow. And they're already, as you know, operating on a shoestring as this is. So on top of what they're dealing with, normal reimbursement processes have yet to come back online. One critical access hospital in Colorado has $1.5 million in outstanding payments that are receivable. That's half of their total monthly revenue. Their ability to pay their doctors and nurses and other staff is at risk as a result of this, so their operation is at risk. It's not just hospitals. Pharmacies like Good Day Pharmacy in Loveland, Colorado, have been forced to pass on the cash piece of medications to patients, some of which cost over $1,000 for over 30 days. Some Coloradans understandably can't afford that expense, and they haven't gotten their medicine. They've been left empty-handed as a result of that. They're unable to pay their bills. They can't, do it. They can't pay it online, and some auto payments have stopped. This single attack, and I know you've heard this today, but one more state. The single attack has kicked off a cascading series of crises that are unmasking some deep vulnerabilities in the core of our healthcare system, and Colorado practices and hospitals have been left to pick up the pieces, covering the costs of someone else's cybersecurity failure. So I wonder what you could say, maybe in addition to what Senator Barrasso asked you about, or what costs you think you might be responsible for here, and how you're thinking about those challenges.
Senator, thank you very much for the question and also sharing the situation in Colorado. And I'm very sorry for the disruption that has been caused there, and we're working very hard to fix those technical solutions as fast as possible. Let me reassure you that our financing capacity remains in place. So, for example, in the hospital that still has a $1.4 million, I think you said, of issue, we will reach out to your office to connect with those folks to ensure that they have the support to bridge them through until they're back to normal. We are more than willing to keep that support in place if that's a month or 2 months or 3 months, and that would be interest-free, no-cost loan to that hospital.
Well, I appreciate that, Mr. Witty. We'll take you up on that. How about is there something to do about the costs on a going forward basis to deal with the, I mean, how are we going to avoid having this happen again in the future?
So that's a very good question. I think we all have to we are clearly trying to take our responsibility in this attack. We are also trying to learn from it. We want to make sure we share all of those learnings. We're trying to be as open as we can be on the things we're learning. We'll continue to do that as our investigations continue to pursue any other understandings here. But the attacks we're under are sustained. They are going up. It's not going down. The attacks are becoming more and more sophisticated. And the levels of technology that we're going to need to protect against those attacks will continue to have to be elevated. And that's going to be a challenge, I think, for many participants in the system to keep up with the pressure, which is why I think it's also important that we focus on how we reduce the attack rate and making sure that the numbers of attacks which come into the health system and more broadly into the country begin to drop. It's simply escalating. And I think the probability of other breaches in other parts of the healthcare environment must be high, given the pressure that the system is under.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
My colleague next is Senator Young, I believe, and then Senator Carper.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Witty, good to see you. Thank you for making yourself available to me in my office and the back end of these attacks. Healthcare entities and devices are increasingly connected to the internet and other healthcare facility networks to provide features that manage administrative functions, increase efficiency, or improve the ability of healthcare providers to treat patients. We, of course, have to have confidence these systems and tools can be used safely and securely in order to reduce risks and vulnerabilities for patients and providers. There remain some unanswered questions and lessons to be learned from this attack. You've acknowledged that. Mr. Witty, one of the workarounds for payers and providers, which we discussed, was to move to a different clearinghouse, including Change Healthcare's competitors. How long could a transition take for a provider to be fully up and running with a new vendor?
Senator, thank you for the question. That can be, I think, within just a few days. I can come back to you on really a more educated assessment of that, but I would say a few days to a week or so.
Okay, and well, that's okay. That gives me a rough estimate. Is Change Healthcare helping with these transitions?
Yes, in fact, we recommended and diverted clients to as many alternative competitors as possible. And we will continue to encourage clients to have a backup system in place, so to have at least two alternate channels in case there were future attacks in the system.
And I know this has already been covered a bit, but to confirm, there's been reporting of exclusivity clauses between Change Healthcare and its clients. Will any exclusivity clauses be enforced? And what should providers be aware of if they transition to a new provider?
Senator, you're quite right that the legacy Change Healthcare contracts indeed did have exclusivity clauses. We've waived those and we would not intend to enforce them because we want to make sure people have backup capabilities in place.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Tulip Tree Family Healthcare is a community health center in the southern part of my state. It's unable to switch clearinghouses. They indicate it's a time-sensitive process for their billing department, which has 2 people, and connecting to the new system could put their cyber liability insurance at risk since it hasn't been guaranteed secure. They've turned to a 100% paper submission of claims by mail, incurring all kinds of overtime expensive and significant postage costs for a small healthcare center that tries to provide the most they can for their patients. Tulip Tree learned about the attack from the national news. Do you have a notification process in place, sir?
That's a very good question. And that's one of the areas where I think we need to figure out how to communicate not just for companies, but for government. We saw the same thing in COVID. It was very difficult to communicate with providers across the system. In this particular attack, our customer files were compromised in the attack. So they were encrypted, which made it very difficult for us to reach out directly to those clients. I would say in this particular situation that you described, we'd love to reach out to your office, understand who that clinic is, and if we can help them in a technical transition,
Yes.
or if they need financial support during the bridge to the new supply, we'd be happy to help.
And you did mention that those mechanisms you've created to provide that financial bridge. I am encouraged by that. How are you more broadly disseminating information to providers, particularly, these small safety net health centers like Tulip Tree?
Again, thank you for the question. So we've used everything from our UHC insurance provider bulletin, which goes to about 1 million physicians across the country. We've used social media. We've sent something like 700,000 emails to a variety of different provider addresses. We've tried to use every channel. We've worked with all of the key medical associations to encourage associations to get the word out to pharmacy, to providers and others. And of course, we've been running regular national telephone calls for technology leaders across all of the organizations and encouraging them to spread the word in their regions. So, for example, large hospitals encouraging them to spread the word. But I do think communication to providers, whether it's a cyber situation or a pandemic situation, I think that is an area which repeatedly comes up as an area for opportunity.
Thank you for answering my questions, Mr. Witty. I guess the only other thing I would ask is you will have all manner of lessons learned, including that there may be limitations under existing law to being able to respond to these sorts of attacks and serve your clients optimally. To the extent those lessons are learned, I ask that you communicate that information to my office and to this committee so that we might consider changing the law.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Chairman?
I thank my colleague, and I look forward to working with him. We've had a very good bipartisan, effort, and my colleague has had a great interest in national security issues, and I'm really struck by how little we know about the data that could involve our service personnel. So I look forward to working with him. Okay, Senator Carper.
Mr. Chairman, to our ranking member, thanks for pulling us together today. And Mr. Witty, thank you for taking the time to talk with me earlier this week and for your testimony today. Among the things that I shared with you are some of the principles that guide me in my life in this role and in other roles I've been privileged to serve. But one of my guiding principles is everything I do, I know I can do better. And I think everything I do, I know I can do better. And I think that's true for all of us. I'm striving toward perfection. No, we're not going to get there, but at least that's our goal. Another one of my guiding principles is to treat other people the way I want to be treated. Golden rule. And I try to put myself in other people's shoes, whether you happen to be a constituent, whether you happen to be a patient, whether you happen to be a practitioner or a provider, put myself in their shoes and let that help guide me. The other thing I mentioned to you yesterday is this is a shared responsibility, the idea of shared responsibility. It's clearly obligations that you and your colleagues have, but there's a role for government, and there's a role for others to play. But there's a shared responsibility. One of the things I mentioned yesterday, I quoted Abraham Lincoln, he was asked, what is the role of government? And he said the role of government is to do for the people what they cannot do for themselves. And there's state government, county, local government, and we have federal government. So there's probably a role for all of us to play. We're proud in Delaware. We have about 1 million people in Delaware. We're about 100 miles from north to south, 50 miles from east to west. I cover my state like a glove every week, just about every week. And it's something I love to do, and it's easy to do. But we've heard from constituents, families, people that have been not just disadvantaged, but really hurt, really potentially put in harm's way. We heard from practitioners and providers in a real way, in a human way, on the phone and in person. So for us, this is very real. But thinking aloud in terms of the role of government, since we are the government, federal government, role of government here, what might be one or two of the roles that we could play, should play?
Well, Senator Carper, thank you very much for the question and your comments. I think maybe two areas I would suggest. One is helping the healthcare system think through what the minimum standards, what the kind of the right level of system protection and redundancy is to try and guard against the impacts of future attacks. And then the second is to see what further can be done, what more can be done to reduce the attack velocity that is coming at the U.S. healthcare system from cyber criminals and other possible actors. So I would maybe suggest those two areas for a thought.
Good, thanks. This attack was, as I understand it, maybe the worst of its kind against our healthcare system and the people that depend on that system, but the ramifications remain widespread. It's clear that Change Healthcare was not prepared for this attack. I don't know if it's possible to actually be prepared, fully prepared for an attack of this nature. But you shared with me yesterday that the attacks are ongoing and they're becoming more frequent, and the people that are doing these, launching these attacks aren't stupid, and they're not getting any dumber, unfortunately. But it's clear that Change Healthcare wasn't prepared for this attack. The lack of basic cybersecurity measures left our healthcare providers and their patients vulnerable to disruptions in care and sensitive data and personal information being stolen. And like my colleagues, I've heard from, as I said earlier, providers, we've heard from practitioners, we've heard from families, from individuals throughout our state who are directly impacted from this attack. One individual we talked to was unable to receive her insulin prescription for several days because of the significant pharmacy delays. And that's not acceptable for any of us. But Mr. Witty, why do you think it took so long for your systems to get back up and running? And why are many pharmacies still offline today?
Senator, again, thank you for the question. And I'm very sorry to hear the situation of the patient who was waiting for their insulin. We have tried to make clear that we would honor any prescriptions which were filled with the pharmacist uncertain of what the reimbursement status was, but perhaps that also emphasizes the challenges of communicating across such a wide group of providers. The speed of recovery of our systems was really determined by the way the attack encrypted large parts of the environment, and to ensure that the system, when it was brought back online, garnered the confidence of all other participants in the environment that it was safe to reconnect to. And remembering that Change Healthcare is a big connecting system, we really built the environment from scratch. So we did not resuscitate large parts of the old environment, which could have brought with it the risks and the suspicion of infection and would have led to, I think, people not being willing to reconnect at all. We spent a lot of time rebuilding from scratch and then having third-party organizations test, scan, penetrate it to make sure it was super robust before it came back. But unfortunately, that took time. And the consequence of the way the attack impacted the first system and then the commitment to bring back a better, clean system was the explanation.
I thank my colleague. Just a few additional questions I'm not clear on. Apropos of the patients, the real victims, in my view, of your negligence, Equifax, for the people who had their information stolen, sent the individuals $5. How are you going to go about compensating people for their stolen data, and do you think that's right to give people $5?
Mr. Chairman, we're working hard to get that notification as soon as possible and to understand who is potentially impacted. But in the meantime, we haven't stood by to wait for that. We've already put in place services, call centers to help people understand the situation, if they need advice, support, and also to make sure that they already can access, and for anybody, and actually whether their data's in this or not, anybody in America can access credit protection and identity theft protection for the next 2 years. It's very easy to do.
Identity theft and protecting against it is something I'm very supportive of, but I also am very hawkish on protecting people's private medical data. And when I saw Equifax giving people $5, and this happened very recently, I wanted to know from you all whether you thought that was reasonable. How are you going to go about it? I mean, do you envision sending out $5 checks too?
Mr. Chairman, at this time, I do not. I feel as if the important thing here is to reassure people that A, we're doing everything we can to try and ensure the data does not in fact leak. B, that we would make sure that their situation is protected through the services that we've already made available and is available to anybody in the country.
Let's also get on the record one of the questions that Senator Mendez touched on with respect to doctors, because for a lot of us, particularly in representing small communities in our states, that Oregon, much of Oregon, is rural. Senator Barrasso was talking about that, as well. Our physicians are very much at risk. They owe you for these loans, and I'm concerned that these loans are going to give you valuable financial information that, based on the company's history, is going to be used to gobble up lots of other small providers across the country. And as you know, I asked you about what was going on in Oregon, that Senator Warren touched on it as well. So this is not a hypothetical question for your company, because your company is buying these people up hand over fist. So I would like to see, at a minimum, a firewall established so as you can't use the data from these doctors that were gleaned from the loan process to go out and buy up more doctors, because that's the last thing we need in America. Will you support that?
Chairman Wyden, first of all, I do support that. I think that's a good idea and a good recommendation. But secondly, I also just want to reassure you, we have not asked for any loan repayment yet from anybody, and we will be guided by the provider's confirmation that their cash flow is back to normal. So it will be under their guidance that conversation would begin. But your suggestion, I think, is a good suggestion, and while I'm very confident we would never take advantage of that information, to be absolutely clear, I'm happy to put in place the process you just described.
So we've been at it for more than 2 hours, now, and there's a lot we don't know. There's a lot that the American people don't know. We don't even know what data was stolen, and I'm not convinced that we are going to find that out anytime soon. We may never find it out. And this data, as I said several hours ago, can reveal abortions, mental health conditions, sexually transmitted infections, and more. And I just want to see evidence that the company is willing, because this company is so big, and we heard my colleagues talk about too big to fail, and I think they were frankly more eloquent than I was a couple of hours ago. But I think companies that are so big have an obligation to protect their customers and to lead on this issue. And in much of what I've read about this, you're kind of saying to the American people, you should feel lucky that we're big. Well, I think that a lot of Americans today don't buy that. And I think that your company, on your watch, let the country down, and these millions of people, on both the prevention side, which is what two-factor authentication, multi-factor authentication is all about, and on getting us back and going. And we still have questions about getting it back and going, and that's redundancy. So there's a lot of heavy lifting to do. And I want you to know that this is the area that I've tried to kind of concentrate on over the years in public service. I was director of the Senior Citizens Group. This is one of the most important issues I've taken on, because I think the intersection of health policy, economics, and national security is now front and center. And I am all in on this. This is one of the most important fights that I've taken on, because what worries me is all these people who are professionals in the field say, shoot, this is an example to the bad guys of what they can accomplish. And you're going to have to be much more active and much more forthcoming in terms of these kinds of specific issues that we've talked about today if we're going to turn this around. So with that, the Finance Committee is adjourned.